Good evening, everyone. Welcome for the zoning meeting tonight. Just a couple of administrative things that I'm going to start with, and then I'm going to get into the agenda. I welcome everyone. We have some new people, or one new person, a couple of new people here that I'd like to introduce. We have Mr. Rich Fredette, who was newly elected to Zoning District 1. Welcome aboard, Mr. Fredette. And of course, Ms. Pepin, Mr. Raguskas, Mr. Fuller, and Mr. Raguskas is sitting in for Mr. Giuliano tonight. Along with, we have another special guest, an intern, Carly Kramer, who is shadowing Mr. Herbansky tonight, and we welcome her as well. Thank you. And of course, our zoning and planning administrator, Mr. Herbansky, and Mr. Floric is our counsel. So thank you, everybody, and we'll get started. For the record, the petitions to be heard this evening were advertised in the Connecticut Post on November 2nd, 2017, and November 8th, 2017. These properties were duly posted on November 8th. So, thank you. Okay. Now I've got a few items that, give me your sheet because you got the markings on it. We have several applications that have been continued, and for the commissioners, if you want to make note of these as well. Number 3 has been continued to 12/12. All of these are going to be continued to 12/12. Okay. 4, 5, 6, and 7, all of those have been continued. So 3 through 7 on the first page have been continued. And then on the new items, number 2, 225 Lordship Boulevard has also been continued to December 12th. So in the end, we have 3 applications tonight, and then of course we have the administrative session that follows. So we should have a pretty straightforward night. I can only impress Mr. Fuller.
Yeah, also point of clarification. I believe number 2 has already been closed as well, so it's an administrative item as opposed to a public hearing item.
Correct. I can, because this is, and I'll just take a couple of words, this will be the last zoning meeting of this term of officers. And I want to just take a personal thank you to having the ability to serve with some very fine commissioners. Ms. Pepin is going to be leaving us. Mr. Fuller is going to be leaving us. And Mr. Giuliano, who isn't here tonight, will be leaving us. And I extend my heartfelt appreciation. You have been excellent, outstanding members. And I think the public grants you and thanks you as well. Mr. Raguskas will be continuing with us, but as an alternate. So we look forward to your continued expertise. And Mr. Fredette, I hope you walk into some big shoes and you'll take on a new role as well. Thank you. Personally, I've enjoyed this moment, and although I will be staying on the zoning commission, as the board has changed, I will not probably remain as chairman. And I will take my seat probably where Mr. Fuller is at and serve quite faithfully. But I very much enjoyed and want to thank everybody for the dedication. This is a volunteer job, and we all work very hard to do the best that we can. So that was my only note to say to that. Okay, with the first application, you want to read it, Ms. Pepin? Yes, Mr. Fredette.
I just have one statement, too, that I need to, I want to state for the record that I did review the
Application?
well, the October 31st, 17 Zoning Commission administrative and public hearing tapes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fredette.
I also would like to qualify that by saying I also watched the tapes, so I am fully up to speed on voting on this particular petition.
Thank you very much. Okay. Ms. Pepin, this is your last chance? Do you want to read number 1 to 11?
Number 1, 211 Ferry Boulevard, petition of Land Sale Properties LLC seeking approval to construct a 5,679-foot retail and 45 apartments in a CA/DOT overlay zone. Coastal site plan review and erosion and sedimentation control application is required.
Thank you very much. Mr. Owen, good to see you again.
Nice to see you. Madam Secretary, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, my name is Nicholas Owen. I maintain business offices at 972 East Broadway here in Stratford, Connecticut. What we have here before us tonight is the continued public hearing for 211 Ferry Boulevard, Land Sales, Inc. The owner of Land Sales, Inc. is sitting here, and the owners of the property, Mr. and Mrs. McNamara, are sitting right over here. So they are fully aware of what's going on this evening. I'm going to leave it up to the Commission. This may be it could be a long presentation or it could be a very short presentation. But what I would like to do is, before I get into my presentation in chief, is ask any of the commissioners if they had any questions at all based on our long presentation at the first public hearing. And if you do, I would like to address those issues first. If not, then there were 3 items that the Commission, quite frankly, asked me to address that were not addressed fully at the first public hearing. The first one, and probably the most important, was that there was an issue on whether or not we had performed a 50-year and 100-year flood reconciliation. That request was brought to our attention by Ms. Tina Baytag from the Wetlands Commission and ultimately got to the hands of the town engineer, Mr. Casey. We did address those issues, and you do, in fact, have in your file the response. And the response, to paraphrase it, is fine, you did the calculations, and we are satisfied with the calculations. I'm not sure that there were any other issues that would relate to that other than the fact that we just didn't have the calculations prepared for you good people at the first hearing. The second of the 3 items that you had requested is if, in fact, we could move the picnic area or recreation area from one end of the project to the other end of the project, which we had room for, and that was based on a comment and a suggestion from a gentleman who lives behind the project on White Street. So what I would like to do is replace that page for the record with what we call a new SP1, and this replaces SP1 dated 1/12/17 to today's date of 11/14/17, and I would like to submit this document or map into the record that shows the new location up in the right-hand corner of the project as requested. That was not a major request. It was something that was relatively easy to do. We just moved it from one end to the other, and if it helps make a neighbor happy, then so be it. Thirdly, and I think this came from the chair wanted us to do something with regard to wanted us to put some type of parapet feature on the ends of these buildings, which you can see we have done. And with that, I would like to replace what was originally submitted as known as A-201 dated 12/12/16 with the new revision, which I've just showed you, and you'll see it on this when you get it, that shows the parapets that have been elevated to make it look more Shakespearean, so to speak. And I'd like to submit this document into the record as evidence. And with that, I would just I'd like to summarize, and then you can open it up for questions of me if you have it. It appears, based on Mr. Habansky's comments, that he was in a very good mood that the day that he wrote up these comments, because as far as I'm concerned, those are some of the nicest comments I've ever seen. I think I indicated at the last public hearing that generally he throws me out of the office, but this time he had a little smirk on his face, so we feel that we have complied in full with the requirements and the spirit of the Transit District Zone regulation. There are a couple of issues that I'd like to go through. As you know, our experts went into great depth in explaining to you how the project works, the drainage, the parking lot, the elevations, the flood zone, and the design of the building through our architects. Further, we feel that since this is a particularly good site for ground floor retail, we've included ground floor retail, which is one of the suggestions, although it's not a requirement in the Transit District Zone. I know the Commission has wanted to see in other projects where there was ground floor commercial. In this one, it lends itself very nicely to it. We're close to an intersection. We are within walking distance of the train station, and we feel we can attract commercial tenants along with residential tenants. This, in effect, is the right spot for the mixed use. Further, we comply in full with the master plan of development of the town of Stratford. I think I went into that in some detail at the last public hearing. Our legal expectations, at the risk of Mr. Fuller getting angry at me, is that our legal expectation is that if we comply with your regulation, we should have approval. And based on that, I respectfully request that this commission approve our proposal, and I see Mr. Fuller is smiling, so he's probably going to slap me down a little bit, but that's okay. This is not a Superfund site. There were some questions as to piles of dirt that were at some point in the past dumped on the property. We submitted by way verbally that we would have those piles tested, and we still intend to do that. You can make that one of the stipulations. However, I will tell you what it is old concrete. And it's old concrete from Mr. McNamara's business on Surf Avenue. His business makes the concrete caskets for the cemetery. So the extra concrete that is snuffed away from it, that's where he previously dumped it, because this site was low. So there's no toxic waste, there's no asbestos. However, since it is going to be part of the overall development and site work, we will test those piles, hire the appropriate people as we should, and we will make sure that we comply with all of the regulations. The design for this building is in keeping, consistent with what you would expect for a design in the Transit District Zone district. It is enhanced. It's not your typical straight-up brick or straight-up vinyl type of project. It is broken up to look like a number of different buildings, and we think it's quite attractive. This plan fits in, and we will design it and build it out once we get to the building end with the Smart Street aspect, which should be in effect, and Jay can correct me on this, in the next 3 to 5 years. So this one will meet those expectations and meet all of those requirements. And with that, this is probably the shortest presentation I've ever made in front of a commission. So if you have any questions or concerns, or you don't understand something that I've said at the first public hearing and would like clarification, I'd love to answer those questions for you.
Okay, I think Mr. Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Mr. Owens. This is my last go at it. I figure I'm going to entertain you with some questions, and I think first I want to preface before I ask my questions. This is exactly what we're trying to achieve with TOD. I was the chairman at the time when TOD became policy, and this is exactly the design structure, the quality of the design structure, the enhancements you put in since the last hearing. The fact that it isn't a maximum residential build-out, that there is first floor commercial activation, is exactly what we're trying to go with. And I appreciate what you're trying to do with the the playground area, trying to accommodate the residents on White Street. This is going above and beyond. This is the extra mile. So I just want to preface before I go into my questions that, and I want to thank you for, one, listening to the residents of White Street, but also really delving into what the TOD and the POCD, the Plan of Conservation and Development, are trying to do, because this is also, TOD or not, that sort of development is in adherence to the Plan of Conservation and Development, not just in action, but in true spirit and in intent as well. My questions, and a couple of them might be reiterations from the previous hearing. I just like to get them back on record, just for thoroughness of the record. Since you have commercial on the first floor, is there any sort of like intended business you're looking for, a certain retail, a certain office space? And if so, what would even if you have any concept of what the hours of operation would be?
I really can't answer that specifically because, quite frankly, we don't know. We would expect that we would have some commercial retail tenants, and we would expect some professional office space.
Okay, like an accountant, doctor, attorney, whatever it might
We
be.
would hope we can attract
Yeah.
those kind of tenants that would stay there for a long period of time.
Okay, so
Not your typical
yeah. So it'd be
1 year-
like your normal business hours, 8 to 5, or
Normal business
Yeah.
hours, yes.
and then it should there in a couple years down the road. Let's try to envision 3 years down the road. Should you not move those commercial properties, those leases or rentals or ownership of those, would you would you go back to the zoning commission at that time to seek approval for full residential?
That's a distinct possibility. However, that would require a new public hearing and a new approval from the zoning commission. That's nothing that we could just do automatically by...
Yeah, that's what I was
That's right.
asking.
Would require a new public hearing.
So the commission at that time would ultimately be the arbiter in that fate, if yes or no on that question.
That's correct, Mr. Fuller.
And then my final question is, I know there's always some questions about anytime you're dealing with waterfront property or anywhere near a tidal zone or any sort of wetland, there's always questions about how far you dig. I know that one of the other reasons why this hearing was left open was to have the Waterfront Harbor Management Commission give some sort of opinion or ruling or to weigh in on this subject. Do you have any conclusion? Were you before the Waterfront Harbor Management
That's
Commission?
a good question. We did, in fact, appear before the Waterfront Authority, and we did present our project to them, and they had no negative comments, and I believe their comments are in Mr. Hibansky's file.
That's correct.
Oh, perfect. And I imagine when you're doing any sort of excavation of any kind, especially when you're in any sort of tidal or wetland area, there's a lot of a DEEP, State Department of Energy, Environmental Protection, EPA, and FEMA red tape that you have to go through, too. So I imagine there's still, even once you get past the zoning commission and the building department here in town, there's a lot of federal and state oversights that you have to comply with when you do that sort of thing.
That's absolutely correct, and we have to comply with all of the rules and regulations from the DEEP, and quite possibly there could be an issue if one arises where we'd have to deal with other agencies in the state.
Perfect. And in closing, thank you for being the first real TOD application.
Well, thank you for your kind remarks, Mr. Fuller.
And anybody else? Mr. Owen, I like the changes that have been made. It definitely fits more of the character of Elizabethan or Shakespearean community and complying with all those other stuff. It looks like a good building, and
Thank you,
I'm
Madam
excited about it. And the changes, even moving the picnic area, is appreciated.
You're welcome. Thank you. I would like to make a couple of personal remarks. Ms. Pepin, I would like to thank you for your kind remarks, for paying attention to me, even when I have been bloviating from time to time at different public hearings. You serve the commission well, and you serve the town well, and I, for one, am going to miss you. Mr. Fuller, you've been a pain in my over the years. However, I do enjoy your remarks. You are critical at times. However, it does make us try to do better, and I appreciate your remarks. And thank you for your service.
Okay, if
And Mr.
there's...
Reguscus, we'll
Oh.
see you again, I'm sure.
Yes,
Okay.
and I'm still here.
And you're still here.
Yes,
Thank you, Stephanie.
thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to Any questions? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
By Mr. Fuller,
Second.
second by Ms. Peppin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And I think we only have... That's it. And we have the new items, right? That's the only- Well, this is our own administrative session. So it's the next one. All right.
Number one, new
So
item.
number one of the new items, the
Madam-
text
Madam
amended.
Chairman,
Yes, please.
Town attorney for 1 second.
Absolutely. And then we're going to move into the new items, the text amendment, so. You're going to talk to this one, right? I don't think there's much to it. Okay. For the record, Mr. Fuller, would you read?
Since we're not taking anything out of order, we're just skipping them.
No, I'm just going by your last act
Oh,
is on
perfect.
being on the zoning.
Okay, the last one. Interestingly enough, new item, agenda item number one, text amendment, petition of the Stratford Zoning Commission, good way to close out, to amend the section 20 and add a site plan review procedure.
Thank you. All right, this is an in-house text amendment, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Urbanski to talk a little bit further. You all got the packet, I'm sure, but Mr. Urbanski, can you just walk us through a little bit for the record?
Sure. Well, the reason for the text amendment to add site plan review procedures and requirements to the zoning regulations were because the zoning regulations themselves were deficient due to the fact that they did not actually identify the site plan review procedures. Part of the reason why we have those in the zoning regulations are to accommodate requirements that are called out in the Connecticut General State Statutes, particularly affordable housing 8-30G projects. We had some recent applications that had come before us that were submitting plans that we felt that were not fulfilling the intent of the site plan review process. That intent had been observed for much longer before I have been here. I've only been here for 2 years. We proposed the text amendment to better align with the Connecticut General State Statutes, and so that the development community has a firm understanding as to what the expectations are when submitting a site plan for review. I'll just preface also that the procedure of the site plan review procedure, it's always been done here. It just has not been called formalized as a site plan review. The special case that we currently do for any development application is identical to what we are proposing, or nearly identical to what we're proposing for a site plan review process. And outside of just reading through the entire text amendment to you all, I know we've discussed it. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Fuller?
Two questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. First question, I imagine this was referred to the Planning Commission and then it's coming back to us for hearing and then ultimate ratification or denial, however the commission rules. Did the Planning Commission add any commentary to this, or?
Yes, they did. At an administrative meeting on October 17th, 2017, the Planning Commission gave a favorable recommendation for approval of the text amendment, their reason being that the proposed text amendment is consistent with the town of Stratford's 2013 Plan of Conservation and Development.
And my second question, and if the town attorney thinks this is more up their alley than you, please, by all means, any town staff that could answer it. But just you as an expert, as a planning and zoning administrator, or town attorney's experts litigating cases of land use matters, do you think this would help ultimately reduce or at least strengthen the town's position should there be any litigation brought before zoning or BZA or any of the land use
Yeah,
boards?
probably.
Just as an
I'm
expert.
not sure, I'll answer first and then I'll turn it to Attorney Floric. I'm not sure that it would necessarily strengthen, but I think that it requires that more information that kind of paints a fuller picture for not only myself, but also for all land use commissioners, that certain things, that certain requirements are on those site plans, and just so the expectations are clear. And I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
the biggest help that we'll have by adding to this.
I'll add to that, though. I do believe it ultimately may reduce the amount of litigation because of confusion and misunderstanding. This is several text amendments. It lays it out very clear, and it makes it much easier for an applicant to understand what their responsibilities are. So taking that logic forward, it would probably avoid nuance litigation that comes from the fact that there isn't clarity. So I do think that this is a good move, and it would help bring better jurisdiction over this. Yes, Mr.
I don't know if the town attorney wants to weigh in too, but I would add that it also adds another layer of transparency, both for the commission, at the commission level, but also for the general public. And for any
Absolutely.
town department that has to deal with these petitions.
So this is a major step forward. Mr. Floric?
Yes, it also closes a loop. Although we have various references to site plans in the zoning regulations, for example, with respect to special cases, we require a consideration of site plan objectives, and there's no stated standards by which those site plans have to be scrutinized. This adds to that. So it does help in a way, because the argument henceforth will not be able to be raised that there are inadequate standards to guide the zoning commissioners in their determination of whether a site plan should be approved or not. So from that standpoint, it does close the loop.
It does. It does. I want to commend Mr. Herbansky for doing this. I want to also add my 2 cents to say that this is the kind of work that we really need to do more of in the zoning, and actually planning and zoning administrator. And I'll put my little 2-cent pitch in for a planner, because we have talked many, many times about the need to review all of our zoning regulations and do this kind of work to close those nuances and I don't want to say loopholes, but nuances that sometimes are not clear. So that's my 2-second pitch. And thank you, Mr. Urbanski, very much.
And I will extend that gratitude to Attorney Floric, who worked on the text amendment with me. So,
Oh, thank you, Mr. Floric. You can take a bow.
I also just want to add one more thing. And Attorney Floric picked up this typo. For proposed text amendment change number 3, it's on the last page. There's a reference to section 4.1.6.12.16.
Yes.
That last number 16, should actually be 17. So there was just a typo. Wanted to make sure that was on the record.
Yeah, I think that'd be perfect when we discuss this administratively, to add that as a correction or amendment to the policy.
Okay, is there any other questions? If not, I'd like to ask for a motion to close on this text amendment, close
Let the
the
newbie
public
go for
hearing.
it.
I make a motion to close.
By Ms. Peppin, second by Mr. Fuller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Motion to close public hearing?
Motion by Mr. Fuller,
Second.
by Ms. Peppin. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Excellent. All right, let's go right into administrative session. This is great. I will impress upon everybody that we should do our best to try to clean up as much as we can so that we leave the next zoning board with a clean slate as much as possible. Yes, Mr. Fuller.
Madam Chair, at the end, instead of dealing with the goal setting, maybe do something where outgoing commissioners could have like a moment to thank the public and give a closing remark.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
I'll
you.
make a motion when time comes for that.
We want to make this a happy occasion.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, the first item on the agenda is 211 Ferry Boulevard, the land sales property. Would somebody like to make a motion to take it
Motion to
off
take
there?
211 Ferry Boulevard off the table, Madam Chair.
By Mr.
I second.
Fuller, second by Ms. Peppin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. Any discussion, or anybody want to make a motion?
Before I make a motion, I just want to make sure, before we do make a motion, I finally see what TOD is intending to do here, and this is a realization of what TOD is trying to achieve. It's consistent with plan of conservation and development, and to be between the train station and ultimately, hopefully in God due time, an open Shakespeare Theater or anything point south, or the riverfront itself. We have a lot of good riverfront in this town. That's a good mixed use for any of those sorts of developments, and it's so adequately located, like conveniently located to any of those. I mean, this is to me, this is what we're trying to achieve. But before I make a motion, I'm just seeing if there's any stipulations we should consider before we dot the i's and cross the t's.
Ms. Peppin?
With retail on the first floor, and as Commissioner Fuller stated before, maybe we can put in a stipulation that if in 2 years or something that they can switch that over prior to.
Just a point of clarification, if they wanted to convert it to retail, they'd have to come
They
back
have to come
before,
back.
I mean, commercial, I'm sorry, I mean, residential.
Residential.
They'd have to come back.
Yeah, they have to come
you
back
don't-
to the zoning commission, whoever's on the zoning commission at that point in time, be a public hearing, they'd have to go through the whole process again.
Right.
And that, which is at their discretion if they chose to go that way.
Okay.
So things like that, signage, which is often another one, those things they would have to come back if it's outside of the realm of the regulations. Mr. Rakauskas?
One thing that popped into my head when Commissioner Fuller asked about the types of businesses that would be there and regular business hours, I'm not saying we have to do this, but maybe we could consider a stipulation on hours of the businesses, so there's not a 24-hour convenience store going in there that might be, disturbing the neyborhood.
Although they might want a 24-hour
They
convenience
might
store.
want- that's why I'm
I
saying
actually think
putting
that's a
it on
good
the
idea.
discussion. There's
yeah.
pluses and minuses to that.
That's one of the ones I would
mean,
hope does come in.
I think kind of the whole idea is to have some of those mixed in with offices as well.
Okay.
So I don't think that would.
Mr. Fuller?
Yeah, and I would also caution against, though it's always fair to ask questions, there's no such thing as a bad question. I would caution against overly having government regulation on businesses. This is really a Ferry Boulevard development, not a White Street development. If this was more right-of-ways on a White Street, I think that's a much more applicable question. But Ferry Boulevard is 24/7 for the most part anyway, so I don't think it's really much of an intrusion to to White Street and that side of the historic district. If anyone would have any issue, it would be the people living in the TOD facility itself, but they know what they're getting into.
Okay, fair enough.
The other thing, too, if it turns out it's a restaurant and they want to serve alcohol, they still have to come back
Yeah,
to us.
permits.
And at that time, we could also,
Certainly.
or that board at that time could stipulate if there's a need for hours. But given the location, dry cleaner, well, there's a dry, but usually neighborhood businesses are the kind that generally move into those mixed-use dance studios and things like that. So I would wait to see what that looks like. And who knows, a 24-hour convenience store might be just what we want. You never know. Any other thoughts? Mr. Fuller?
I'll make a motion to approve 211 Ferry Boulevard with the stipulations mentioned in previous hearing, if we placed any of them on it. But I think they addressed all of them.
They addressed
And
all of
there's-
them. The plan that they submitted addressed
Yeah.
all of those, so it's just a
So
straight
it's a
motion.
straight-up approval.
Yes.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Peppin. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. Second item on our on our administrative agenda is the text amendment from ourselves regarding the medical marijuana. We closed the public hearing the last meeting, and we had extensive discussion for several meetings. Mr. Fuller?
I'll make a motion to take the second item off the agenda, the text amendment for the medical marijuana regulations.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Peppin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Okay. Mr. Fuller, in a roll.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This was a project long in the making, and I'm very proud that this commission and the Planning Commission and corresponding staff, both Gary Lorenzo and Jay Hibansky, to follow, this was really how to craft public policy. It might be long, it might take time, but I feel that no stone was left unturned. We approached this from every possible angle we possibly could. And as many of us are, there's going to be, I believe, 4 new commissioners, regular commissioners, not counting the alternates. I think it's also responsible that we make a decision on this tonight, because it gives them the time and latitude to see how this policy would be in action, as opposed to, well, do we need another moratorium? Do we need to consider other prohibitions? Now they have the latitude to look at these things as a special case petition to address maybe the production facility side in due time. What we're doing is we're giving them a canvas to work off of, and I think it's time.
I wanted to make one recommendation we talked about that's not, I don't believe, it's not written in it right now, and that is to put a stipulation that no more than 2 facilities, dispensaries would be granted.
Yeah, I agree with that.
A licensing at this point. Certainly, future zoning boards can revisit that if they feel that there's a need to open it up more, but at least to start off with a limitation on 2, I thought, is what we had discussed.
I would agree with that. I know there's no motion on the floor, but if there's a motion to approve, I hope that's stipulated in there.
I'm sure you'll help us, Mr. Fuller. Dispensaries. Any other comment, discussion? Mr. Fredette? No. Right, Mr. Fuller?
Madam Chair, here it comes. I make a motion to approve this text amendment with the added stipulation that no more than 2 dispensaries are to be, I don't know, is it licensed or permitted at the same time?
Permitted.
Permitted at the same, concurrently, also if the commission wants to revisit the legislation in a future date. So with that said, I make a motion with the stipulation about no more than 2 facilities permitted, dispensary facilities.
And there was
permitted
one
at-
other I just thought of, if you may add, that this approval is limited to medical marijuana, not
Yep,
recreational
and it's
marijuana.
also right there up front, early in the legislation, that no recreational substance is to be dispensed, created, or sold.
Correct. It's a little bit of an overkill, but it doesn't hurt. Anything else? Excuse me? Nope.
I'm going to
Nope,
second.
nope. I'm just looking for any other comment, and then Mr. Fuller's going to bring this forward.
If I can just say, or ask, Mr. Fredette, did you listen to the tapes of the public hearing on this matter? Okay.
I believe Mr. Fuller made a motion, correct?
Yes.
And we got the full motion?
I second.
It's been second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. This has been continued. Yeah, I think we're going to jump.
You don't do the section 21?
One I have, that's a different one than I have. I have,
Oh, this one, this
yeah, the text one, we're going to move. Yeah, I was just,
one there.
right, we're going to do, but I was looking at page number 2, which is the second one. Everything on that was extended.
Yeah.
So now we're going to the third page of this, which is the second one of the third page, the text amendment. Ms. Peppin, you want to take this off the table? It is the petition of the zoning commission to amend, it's the second one on the third
Text
page.
amendment.
Yeah,
Petition of the zoning commission to amend 20 to add site review procedures.
thank you. Is there a second?
A tentative second, but just for the record, the medical marijuana has had no bearings on me eating M&Ms tonight. Second.
Second by Mr. Fuller, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously. Okay, we just heard about this. Can we bring this to a motion, or are there any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve this. It's modernizing our whole process.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Peppin. All in favor?
Aye.
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 The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, I think that's all we have for those. To the last page. We're moving along pretty good, folks.
Now we have to do the approval of minutes.
Yep, we're going to get to the approval of minutes, and which should be pretty straightforward. I just want to read the date. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of October 31st, 2017? Is there
I'll make a motion.
By Ms. Peppin, second by?
I think you guys should
All
be
right.
going.
I'll take it.
It's your night.
Yes, it's a Pepin Fuller tag team tonight.
Yeah. By Mr. Fuller, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. All right, so we're going to go into the discussion of work. We've cleaned up quite a bit today. Gee, where's my last page disappeared to? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I got it. It just folded. All right, we have a few, number 3, the campsite review plan. We've got a few items on this. 2 of them have been extended. So let's start with 211 the Ferry Boulevard. We just approved it. This is the campsite review portion of that.
I don't think you need to take this off the table, but
No, we don't. You just need
I'll make
to...
a motion. They've addressed a lot of the CAM in their zoning hearing, so I'll make a motion to approve the 2011 Ferry Boulevard CAM.
Perfect. Ms. Peppin?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. The self-storage, that's been continued. Watson Boulevard has been continued indefinitely. Any in zoning enforcement study complaints?
No.
None in there. No accessory apartment applications?
No.
And then we have the sediment and erosion control applications. Same thing, 211 Ferry Boulevard. Ms. Peppin, why don't you make the motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the 211 Ferry Boulevard sedimentation and erosion control application.
Thank you. Second by Mr. Fuller. Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you. And East Main has been continued. All right. Planning projects, Greenway. Ms. Peppin, we're going to miss
Greenway,
you
we're
tremendously.
still-
So
We're
your last
still
report.
waiting. I guess with the new administrator, we'll probably wait until January to get the approval of BSC to move forward on the Greenway. And I will keep you posted on that through planning so that everyone will know
Excellent.
what's going on.
Congratulations. Thank
Takes a
you.
little bit longer sometimes to get through that, but hopefully by January, February, we'll get approval.
It's one of the
Move
it's one of the projects we're most proud of. I think we all uniformly
Yeah,
are very proud of that project.
It's been a long road. It's a little frustrating at some times, but I think we'll get through it, and by springtime, hopefully, things will be moving.
And thank you for serving on that so
Well,
admirably.
I'll still be on that, so
Yes.
it'll be my connection.
Any questions anybody has? Okay. The vote on the 2018 meeting schedule, we need to do that tonight or in January?
Yeah.
I mean, no, December.
Yeah, it's
Night.
done.
Yeah, but
Okay.
Yeah.
a quick question before we make a vote on it. Should the next, because technically we're deciding the schedule for completely 4 new people on the board. Should they feel like there's a, like December and November are like always like weird because of the holidays, do they have the time, like the ability to adjust that? I suppose they could always call it a special meeting, but
Sure. And they have the ability to either cancel that meeting and reschedule for the 3rd week or this. I mean, it couldn't be any earlier than we have it scheduled
Yeah.
here. That's in order to meet the advertising
Yeah.
requirements. But they could always schedule it for the last Tuesday, which I kind of think has worked well at
Yeah.
least this year because it was so tough getting
I,
people
I
around
I
the
don't
holidays.
imagine them trying to change it anyways. It's it was the last Tuesday of the month before Linda Pepper and I came on the board, so I don't see a massive deviation, but it's always, like, I always feel weird binding another board, like a future board's hands with,
Yeah, so do I.
yeah.
The only thing is, I hadn't had time to check to see if there's any holidays, Jewish holidays, that we overlap with, and you did check? Thank you, Mr. Urbanski. He did check.
I did. There's certainly possible that there's one that I don't know of that's observed. That's certainly a possibility, but I checked all the major all the major religious holidays in general, and nothing seemed to fall on those dates. I took into account the Mondays off that will be kicked out of here from the town council.
Yes.
I think I made all my mistakes last year.
Excellent. Any questions about the calendar? I think the next board would probably be happy with it, at least with the best knowledge that we have.
Well, I'll break with tradition tonight, since I'm not going to be on the next council. I say the rookie, who's not a rookie at all, should make the motion.
Mr. Fedett, would you like to make the motion?
Make a motion to accept the schedule for next year's meetings.
Thank you very much. A second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Augustus.
You see, they ran against each other, and now they're making motions together.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And the fee schedule for 830G. And why don't you walk us through this a little bit, because there are some changes. I know we had an applicant who brought forward that I wasn't a part of, but made some recommendations. Why don't you walk us through this?
Okay, well, this is related to one of the moving parts to the site plan review application process. Basically, we had applicants that were coming in saying, well, since you don't have a site plan review procedure for an affordable housing project, and that's what we're submitting, we don't have to pay. So by adopting the site plan review procedure and by now attaching a fee to that process, which is by no means punitive, we charge exactly that we charge for any type of development. It's actually the exact same fee schedule for special case. So all we're doing is now creating a category so that we're essentially closing that loophole for applicants to submit and put all of us through lots of hard work and the town not being compensated for it.
And this is just for the 830G applications?
Correct. Well, the site plan review will be done, and it already is done, but it's formally a part of the variance process, the subdivision. The only time we have to charge for it is for an affordable housing project. That's the only time we would have to charge, because we wouldn't be charging a special case fee because it's not a special case.
Yeah. It really sounds like we're just fine-tuning the categories and the languages. Just make sure 830G is charged as 830G, special case is charged as special case. Even
The
if they're
charges are the
number.
same, right? The fees are going to be the same as the,
Yeah, I
Special
mean,
case?
this
Exactly the
is common sense.
so these are the same fees for both? Which also gives the ability that if we change the law in Hartford, or if there's other changes, you can adjust one without the other. I'm assuming that.
Sure.
Any questions for either Jay or Mr. Floric?
Just a procedural question. Are we making a motion to approve the fee schedule?
Yes.
Okay, then no question. I'll
Okay.
see if anybody else has a question first.
Well, you can make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve and update the fee schedule. Oh, unless Attorney Forek has something to say.
Yeah, I know that in the past, it's been custom for this commission to set the fees. Unfortunately, the statute says that the legislative body of the town will set the fees. So what I would like to see this commission do is refer this to the
Okay.
council with a favorable recommendation.
Oh, that's different.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Thank you, Attorney Forek. That's very good. I'd like to make a motion to refer with favorable recommendation a fee adjustment schedule for 830G applications to the Stratford. I guess this would be applicable to any land use board, not just the zoning commission. If they were to go wetlands, BZA, whatever it might be, that this fee would be applicable. So I make a motion with favorable recommendation to approve the fee adjustment.
That's a motion. Is there a second by Mr. Fredette? Any other further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So we got those two things. All right, as far as the goal setting,
You actually knocked one off.
we knocked one off. That's exactly right.
Right.
I would ask your indulgence that at this point, other than the fact that we are removing the medical marijuana moratorium, if we can make note of that. Are there any others that you would like to see removed? Otherwise, they will stay to the next commission. Mr. Fuller?
The methadone clinic one is, I guess I'll touch all of them at once. Army Engine Plant, by the graces of God, please. To the methadone clinic, what I'll do is I'll come back as a member of the public and speak before the zoning commission at that time to continue a moratorium forward.
Well, it has to remain on the goal setting because we haven't addressed that, and that moratorium will expire or come up for a decision. So regardless, that has to stay on the goal setting
Yeah.
going forward. Parking, on the other hand, that was something we added and does not necessarily need to go forward if you...
Yeah. POCD, that's always ongoing. And
But let me
Yeah.
go back. Parking, I believe, Mr. Fuller, you were on that, but we have some parking regulations that Mr. Urbanski's been working on for some time. He actually gave us a summary of it, if you recall. I think it's in planning's hands now?
Correct. You referred it to the Planning Commission, and there's just a lot in there, as you all saw. So we discussed it for maybe an hour, and they said, we just need more time. So they're still working on that.
that's perfectly okay. We're moving the ball forward one way or the other.
So my recommendation, Mr. Fuller, is to take your name off, no
Yes.
negative
please take my
intended,
name off. I'm
and just leave Mr.
I'm not a
Urbanski there?
commissioner.
Okay? Recommendations to the town council, that's usually a standard one. POCD, that's usually a standard one. And then we have the last one, which is right now sitting in the planning, which is the TOD, the density considerations. We already did send the density considerations to the planning commission for informal review. We are awaiting their response back at this point. I would,
You should have received it in your last.
Yeah,
packet.
I remember reading something that they were
I thought they
were
tabled it.
effectively looking for more time.
Yeah, that's how I read it. They were looking for more time.
No. They felt that the densities that were being proposed were not incentivizing the end product that the town and the POCD was looking to create. So they basically had recommended, and I don't have it, of course.
Yeah, I didn't see any recommendations back from them, so if you can find it.
Should have been sent out in your last. Let me see if I have it here.
I think they were still kind of weighing the whole thing.
Well, I can resend it. I mean, we could always just leave it on, and we can.
Yeah.
I
provide it again next-
I would leave it on. The next commission could remove it, or you'll have an answer by then. There's no harm. So we've removed one, adjusted a second, and unless anybody else has anything, I just want to follow through with Mr. Fuller's idea, which I thought was wonderful, for everybody to take a moment, if you'd like, and just reflect. Mr. Fuller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 4 years is a long time to volunteer for anything, and it's first and foremost, I want to thank the voters of the 5th and 6th council districts, which is also referred to as Planning District 3, for the confidence, for the honor, and for the privilege of serving. I've lost an election before that, and that was the first win, so it really meant a lot to me, and I just hope I serve them with the same confidence and honor that they've given me. There's a couple other people I want to thank, too. Every commissioner I served with, Tony Smith, Linda Manos, Mike Henrick, Alan Llewellyn, you, Madam Chair, Steve Raguskis, Gavin Forrester, Ann Baker as alternates. Mike Hennick was an alternate and as a commissioner. Ron Hoydick was once a alternate during that time. Joe Paul, who served a very short term. Scott Farrington Posner, who served the term, and for one night and one night only, Rich Fredette, and 4 years, the only zoning commissioner partner I had for 4 years, Linda Pepin, who's been a rock on this commission. You get to see everything on the zoning commission. We've seen inside dog parks, we've seen breweries, we've seen controversial housing, we've seen it all. And I found zoning to be more rewarding than the town council because you really have to look at the pro and con. Really have to be a juror or an arbiter in many ways. And it works. This town works, and you learn so much about this town. We have an industrial district. We have open space. We have waterfront. There's just so much to this town that really is just undersold and is a story not being told. And the other thing I hope is that government continues to be transparent and continues to strive for greater transparency. And transparency is not access to documents. It's access. It's accessibility. What's getting tougher and tougher is for working people to participate in government, whether it's zoning commission, town council, even something like a beautification committee or Parks and Rec or something like that. There's something's got to be done about having the meetings people be able to get to meetings or be able to view meetings. I don't know what the answer is, but there seems to be people who can do politics and people who are affected by politics. And most of the people affected by politics work, go to school, or take care of family members. And the more we focus on weekend activities and nighttime activities, the more we open up the government. And I really hope to see that move forward in this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Pepin?
Well, 4 years ago when I decided to run, I thought I'd been on planning for 4 years, 2 years prior to that. Prior to that, I had been an alternate on planning for 2 years, and I thought, do I really want to do this? So I said, no, you know what? I really want to do this. I want to help the town of Stratford. I want to move us forward. And there wasn't everyone that you asked to help to do this. It's like anything else in school and in PTAs and everything. It's the same old people. But I tried to get some of my neighbors involved, my friends involved that live in town, and I said, I'm going to do this. So I ran, and I won. And I thought, oh boy. So the first couple of years, I was like, this is great. This is fantastic. We're moving the town forward. And then something went wrong. And I tried to get through it. And I'm glad that I had the commissioners on our side, all of us, and the administrator who, for the past 2 years, has been a really big help. I mean, prior to you, Jay, I think sometimes I was like a little bit lost, but you kind of gave us some guidance each time with each petition, which I think is helpful because we don't know. We're just, doing our own thing. Most of us completely different than anything that's come forward to us. But I appreciate that. And so I really feel that I've done something. I hope I have. Right now I'm going to take a break because it's been a long, long time, and I have a mom who's sick and things going on. But I hope maybe in the next couple of years I'll decide to maybe do another commission, do something else. But I appreciate all the commissioners' help and Stephanie as chair. You did a great job, and I appreciate that. And Gail, too, with all your notes and your stuff back. So thank you. And also my, 7th and 8th district people who voted for me. So thank you.
My appreciations to Linda Pepin, who served as my vice chair. And you were wonderful as a vice chair. We worked very well together. It was ideal. And Mr. Fuller, who I enjoyed always with the knowledge that he has had, and we have worked extensively well together. And might I add that what made us, this commission, I think, different, say, than some of the other boards that I've heard comments on, we have worked well together. We have been able to put the politics aside and work for the betterment of the people and the applicant. And I'm very proud of that. And we got a lot accomplished. If you look at what we've done in the last couple of years, especially since I've been here, I know even before, we've accomplished a lot. We've written new regulations, we passed some major applications, and with the help of Mr. Floric, Mr. Herbansky, and of course Gail, by the way, who's invaluable if you're sitting in this seat. Thank you. It has made being on the Zoning Commission enjoyable, and I'm hoping the next commission will have the same courtesies and respect. I'm sure it will. I have great faith in the people who are coming on board, and I like to think that we may have set an example of how we can work together to move the town forward in a positive, productive manner. And we didn't spend too many late nights unless we really had to, except only for a lot of applications. Everybody was patient, good-natured. Mr. Rogaskis, I know you'll be here as an alternate, but we won't be able to see your smiling faces often. But we will miss your thoughtful, insightful, very voice of reason approach. And I'm going to miss Mr. Giuliano, who also brought a considerable experience and thoughtfulness. So I can't tell you from the bottom of my heart, I am proud and honored to serve with you all. And Mr. Fedette, I look forward to working with you as well. At that, I don't think there's any other business. It's 8:10. It's also possibly a record for us. Would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
Oh, I don't want to jinx it.
I make a motion to adjourn.
By Ms. Pepin, second by Ms.
I'll second.
by Mr. Fuller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and thank you.
Count as correct.
So now what about the 12th?
I suppose we're still on duty if there's a special meeting up till December 11th.